So delighted to say that I've got Amy Goodall-Smith here today from Goodall-Smith Wealth Management. So thank you for spending the time to be able to help people with their pensions. Because pensions is it's a big area. Your retirement is massive and planning for it. But also one thing I've come across in clinic a lot is that there's a lot of misunderstanding about pensions and whether they're worthwhile or not. And so what I did was, knowing that we've got this interview coming up, was I also put the question out there on social media, just to ask people if they had any particular questions about pensions that they're kind of scared to approach a financial advisor about, so that you'd be able to answer those and people be able to see the answers. So I've got a couple of lists of questions. And it's really for during this talk, we'll talk about state pensions, but then also about pensions if you're employed, and also for those that are self-employed, and then really planning for then what happens once you're actually retiring. So just so that people know just how we're going to go through things. So I suppose the first point then is state pensions. Just describe a little bit about the state pension, what that is, first of all.
Yes, okay. So the state pension has changed massively through the years. And some people have still got accrued more benefits from when they had a very old style state pension. So I'm just going to talk about today's state pension and how it is today. So every year you work, you pay national insurance contributions, and this accrues what used to be known as a stamp, okay? So a contribution to your pension allowance every year. And to qualify for the full state pension, you need to accrue 35 years of working. And the current state pension is just over about £9,400 a year, which is quite a significant amount of money, actually, particularly when you add your own savings to that, okay? And if you haven't worked so if you have, there are some scenarios where you can accrue benefits but not actually pay national insurance. So one of them is if you have had a child or been looking after a child for a period of time, that you can still accrue those benefits. Also, if you're a business owner and you pay yourself just below that limit of, it's about £736 a month, isn't it? You accrue national insurance, but you don't physically pay them. So as you're nearing retirement, you want to start thinking about how much state pension you're going to receive. And you can fill out a form called a BR19 form. And that basically tells you what your entitlement is and how many years you've accrued. As you get nearer, you can buy extra years. Again, I don't massively encourage that as a sort of standard practice, because if you do it too early, you may not get to your retirement age. You may never receive that money back. You have to work out whether it's cost versus value, which is what we talk about all the time. And some people, when they receive their benefit, actually have slightly lower amounts because you have done something called contract out. You can't do it now, but historically you could. So when I first started work, long time ago, they said to me, do you want to contract out? And I said, I don't know. Yeah. And they just said, yeah, do it. So I ticked a box and said, great. Now, what that meant was the national insurance contribution that I paid that year, instead of going to the government to pay the pensioners, because it basically comes in and goes straight back out again, went to my pension pot. So it was rediverted into my pension pot. So my kind of hope was that my pension pot would grow at a far greater rate than the amount going towards my state pension. So that's what contracting out is.
Okay.
So when you get your sort of report back, when you filled out your BR19 form, they say, well, you should have this, and we're making allowance for the fact you contracted out, and you should have accrued this kind of benefit in your own pension pot. That's what that is. So if you've got missing year contributions, I would get some advice on whether you should pay those or not. If you've got missing years, whether you should top up. And at what point you should do that, really. But that's how it works. And you can, if you have an online login, you can actually go in and see any missed years, and you can kind of challenge that if you want to, and work out, well, why have I got a miss year that year? I'm definitely working at this place, and you can, if you've got pay slip or something, you can. So that's what state pension is. It's very good, actually, and I don't think it's going to go away like everyone keeps saying, because everyone would be in poverty. So I don't believe it will go. It will get later, but it won't go.
And that's it. That's where you're saying that where you can go and log in, it tells you when that will be paid out, doesn't it? So when your retirement,
yes,
as far as the state is concerned, your retirement age. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So they moved the date. So for men it used to be 65, I think, and for women it was 60, and they slowly moved it later and later. So men and women are the same age. And so like I'm 68, I think.
I think I was about to say, I think it's 68, isn't it? Yeah. I remember having a look.
So it will get later, and I do believe it'll get later because we're all working later. And this sort of blended retirement, this sort of phased retirement that we're all doing does mean I think it will get later. So.
And that will get later for us as well, do you mean? Or people, or younger generations coming through?
Likely to be younger generation, because if they moved it later for us, we haven't got much time then to plug the gap. They're removing some of our benefits, so unlikely for us, but possible, but unlikely, I would say.
Yeah, perfect. And then, because you mentioned there's times when there's the where you can miss the contributions, so but that it's made up, for example, if you have children. What about in other situations, if you're out of work for an extended period, or if you're a carer? What would happen?
So if you are claiming benefits, often that will you will still accrue the kind of that year's contribution. I have to say that it's such a vast area, but I know, for instance, job seekers allowance, I think you also claim your NI. And definitely there are other benefits as well, because it wouldn't be very fair to say to, there is an element of fairness where it's like, okay, if you don't have a job, you can't contribute. As long as you're trying to get a job and claiming job seekers, then actually it should be fair that you accrue the benefits. But I'm not actually 100% sure which benefits, but I'm pretty sure most will accrue on NI. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then, so as far as with pensions, are there different types? Or is it all one thing?
Lots.
Yeah.
Lots of different types. Actually, there was something called pension simplification. I mean, for most people, that's a complete joke because they're still really complicated. But it is better for us, this sort of pension simplification thing that happened. Generally, most of the old style pensions are now gone, and you're left with two main types of pensions. One is known as a final salary scheme, or defined benefit is a technical term. So defined benefit is, it's defined what benefit you're going to receive. Okay, so that's why we call it defined benefit. And that is basically where you've worked for a company and they've said you have this pension, and we promise to pay you a percentage of your annual salary or your average salary for the rest of your life. And they work it out on how many years did you work there, what was your salary, and then an actuarial calculation. So it's a percentage of your salary that they are promising to pay you, and they will pay you that for the rest of your life. And on your death, if you are married, you have it will pay your spouse 50% of that salary. If you don't have a spouse, it dies with you. If your children are beyond this dependent age, which is normally about 23, it doesn't pay out to your children. So you could have worked somewhere for 25 years and got this beautiful 60 grand a year pension, and you die 3 years later and it dies with you. Or you could live to your 106 and it pays out that whole time this incredible salary.
Yeah.
And you guaranteed it. Okay, you're guaranteed it. So that's one type of pension. And there's another type of pension known as, we call it a money purchase or a defined contribution. You know how much you can pay in, but you don't know what you're going to get out. So you know the defined contribution, what you're paying in. And this is now what most people have. Okay, if you've got a final salary or defined benefit, that's a golden egg. that's very old school. Most people don't provide that, and you have this normal pension where you're putting money in, you build up a pot of money, and then at 55 or beyond, you can access that money, and there are different ways you can access that money. Either a similar way to take how you paid out your final salary, or you can take out what you want when you need it. So they're the two main pensions: defined benefit, you know what you're getting, and defined contribution, you know what you're putting in.
And then so on the pension front then, so you're saying about the final salary, so that's where you're employed. So just to focus a bit on people that do have jobs and then they have a pension from their business then, because like you say, things have also changed in that not everybody has the job for their entire working career at the same firm. You can move on to lots of different companies. So what happens there where you've got, I don't even know what the average could be, like loads and loads and loads of different smaller pensions. Does it have to stay like that, or is it better to bring it all together? Like, what's the situation?
So you accrue lots of different pots of pensions, and generally a final salary defined benefit pension is usually provided by an employer, but your money purchase, your defined contribution, can be one that you set up yourself or one that an employer has produced. So it's not really connected with your employment. But you're right, you accrue lots of pensions through your life, usually 6 or 7, depends how many jobs you've had. And often people say, oh, I don't think they provided a pension. One of my clients is a hairdresser, and he said, oh, definitely didn't get a pension. But we did a bit of digging, and he did get a pension. So we find money a lot of the time. There is something called a pension tracing service, which HMRC put together, Department of Work and Pensions, I think. Not that great, but they do find pensions for you. So you might have 10 different pensions, and each of them has a different charging structure. Each of them has a different fund, a fund manager, risk profile. Each of them has different growth rates, might have different benefits, might have twiddly bits, as I call it, special little bits attached to it. If they're older, this tends to happen. And it's fine to have all those pensions. It's just you need to keep tabs on them every year. You need to look at the fund, you need to look at performance, you need to check changes, you get a lot of paperwork. And a lot of my clients do not want that, because most of those pensions don't have advice attached to them either. So they're cheap and cheerful, and they're not giving, they don't even know what's in there. Most people have never looked at their pensions ever. And that's okay, because you don't even know what to look for. So a lot of people find it much simpler to consolidate them. The other reason for that is when you want to start taking money, you're going to have to balance out ringing 10 different providers to take the right amount of money, so you're not taxed too much or whatever, to try and blend your income. I call it like taps, okay? You want to turn income taps on. Which tap are you going to get? And how, oh God, I forgot to turn that tap off. It's much more difficult to manage. Much easier if it's in one place. But you do need probably a driver that's more than just simplicity. Advice is really important. So yes, a lot of clients consolidate. They know, they get advice, they review it every year, they know where it's invested, they know what the charges are, and they know that they can get support when they're taking income out at retirement age.
And so if you're employed, then is it worthwhile having an IFA sooner to consolidate that? Or is it only after you've finished working that you consolidate it?
No, do it now. Do it now, because what we tend to do is you can move your employer benefits as well. So it might be that your employer provides you with a provider with people's pension, and actually you find that the growth on it is not very great. So you can kind of empty the pot out and add it to the one you've consolidated, and then it refills up with your contributions, and you just empty it out every now and again.
Oh, okay.
Or as you move providers, you can just move as you move jobs, you just move your pensions with you and consolidate it. So absolutely get a grip. The sooner you get a grip on it, the better. As well as things like reclaiming any tax reliefs that you're due. Really important to make sure. Oh my gosh, I had a client who's a 45% taxpayer, so big earner, and was missing out on 25% of tax relief that he could have been reclaiming for like a 10-year period.
Wow.
So had he just sought advice, we could have just nipped that in the bud, and it just wasn't an issue. So, but I would not recommend consolidating pensions yourselves, because you may lose very, very valuable benefits that are sewn up into that particular pension. For example, when you take your pension, you are allowed to have 25% of your pot, so a quarter of your pot can come out without any tax. It's called a tax-free lump sum. Now, some old pensions have a much greater value that's tax-free. So if you've got a big pension pot there, say 200,000, and 25% is tax-free, that's 50,000 without tax. That's really good. Now, if that old pension actually allows you, which I have seen, 49% tax-free cash, that's 100 grand you can take out without paying tax on.
Yeah,
tax on 100 grand is a lot of money. You know, it's like, I don't know, 30 or 40,000, you know, it wouldn't be that much, but you know, it's a big chunk of money that you're saving.
Yeah.
And if you're doing this yourself, you won't know to look for those twiddly bits.
Yeah, definitely.
Keep referring to
and it's
very technical.
The twiddly bits can be retwiddled as well. So
yes. But once you've lost them, you've lost them. So so really, it's a really, you have to be really cautious. And actually, I do get a bit cross. Some of the HR, you know, your HR department say, "Oh, we'll move that one over as well," and it's like, "Oh gosh, you need to be qualified to do that." Anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And so whether you're employed or self-employed, I'm going back here now to the talk that you did about the money pyramid. So is there a time in your, depending on the stage you're at with savings and investments, or an age where it's better to opt out or not be putting money into a pension and be putting it elsewhere?
There's never an age not to put money into a pension. So I'll tell you why. So actually, one of the really good things I do with grandparents is some grandparents have surplus income in retirement that they don't need. And what we do is we pay that into the grandchildren's pension. So you can have a pension when you're born. Okay. And the government will top you up with tax, even though you've never paid it. So you can pay into a pension £2,880 per year into a pension if you are a non-earner. So my 11-year-old daughter, I could pay £2,880 into a pension, but the government will top that up by 25%. So she'll end up with 3,600 in a pension. So it's over 700 quid of free money for her. Not only that, at 11, poor thing, be about 60 years before she can retire. You imagine the growth that will be achieved in 60 years on that 3,600. If you compounded that up, that means you put growth on the growth on the growth. That growth rate will absolutely rocket. So the sooner you chuck money in a pension, the better. Actually, if you paid something like 3,600 a year, or those figures, 2,880 for a child from the moment they're born to the age 18, and that was the only contribution you ever made. It works out about 60 grand or something like that. I can't remember the figures of contributions. You will never have to pay into a pension again for them. They will never have to pay into a pension. They'll end up with £1 million when they retire. That is the pure growth, compound growth that you can achieve. So the sooner you pay into a pension, the longer that money works for you, and you do nothing, the less you pay in. So that's why it's really important. And the other thing I said is the government gives you your tax back. So Rachel, you know, if we earned 40,000 a year, we're basic rate taxpayers. If we put all of our earnings, so if we I have to do the maths now. If we earned 40 grand a year, we probably end up with about 30,000 in our bank. Okay. If we put that 30,000 into a pension, the government gives us all our tax back, so you end up with 40 grand again. So that's why they're so brilliant. You get your tax back. And if you're a 45% taxpayer or 40% taxpayer, you get all of that 40% tax back as well. So we love it. That's why we love them. And one of your questions you were going to ask, and I'm going to answer it before you ask it, is are you better to pay through earned income from your company, right? You know, so if you're a self-employed person and you have a limited company, you can take money out, pay the tax on it, put it into a pension, get the tax back, fine. Or you don't have to use your earnings, you know, allowances and take more money out than you want to. If you pay your pension from your company, that's called it's a gross contribution. So if you take 20 grand out of your company and you pay it into a pension, 20,000 goes into your pension. So no tax is deducted in any way. The other benefit of doing it that way is you don't pay corporation tax on that 20,000, for example, because it's classed as a business expense. So therefore you get to reduce your profit by making a pension contribution, and therefore you pay less corp tax. And that's particularly important now the corporation tax levels are going up for, I think it's over 250 grand turnover, whatever it is. So it's really, really valid. Again, you save yourself 19%.
And so so two questions then within that. So the first one being, you just mentioned the corporation tax. So could it be that where you spot there's extra profit that you're not wanting to have to one side for other investments within your business?
Cash flow,
Yeah, so you can then just take that lump and then pop it into your pension and save tax that way. So you can just do that as and when. Excellent,
So it's better to do it at your financial year end, so your company financial year end. If you can do it before that and get your timing right. So let's use simple numbers. You need 50,000 in your business for operating profit, cash flow, whatever, but you've actually got 150 grand in your business. I mean, maybe that's crazy, but you know, you've got 70,000 in your business, right? That 20k that's surplus, chuck it in your pension, and you won't pay 19% on it. So you'll save yourself nearly 4 grand.
Yes,
tax.
Yeah, not to be sniffed at.
Well, no, brilliant. It's really good, and you can still access it at 55, which sadly is getting close the rest of the year.
I know, isn't it?
So it's really good. Now, the only thing to be mindful is if you have an annual allowance that you can pay into your pension, so only allowed to pay in 40,000 a year from your business. Okay, if you pay it personally, you can only pay in the equivalent of your salary. So if
that was my next question.
Like most business owners, so like business owners, we take about 8 grand in salary and the rest in divvies. You're capped at that 8 grand because that's known as your net relevant earnings, or relevant earnings will be 8 grand, and that's all you can pay into a pension personally. And or if I was employed and I earned 30,000 a year, I can only pay up to my earnings, so I can only pay 30,000 and not the 40. However, if you have had a pension in the past, it might be got 100 quid in from 20 years ago, it doesn't matter, you have a pension, you have had a pension. The government allow you to look back over the last 3 tax years and see if you have any headroom in your allowance that you haven't used, and to put that in. So again, if I'm a business owner and I had a pension when I was employed, when I was age 20, left it, don't know where it is, but I know I had one, I found the paperwork, it's got grand in. But I'm a business owner and I spent the last 6 or 7 years building my business, and finally I've got some money. I can pay this year's allowance from my business, 40k, plus one from 3 years ago to so the last 3 years, I can pay 160 grand into my pension, and it comes off my profit. Brilliant. Imagine that. And that saves you in corporation tax £30,000.
Yes.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, it's a salary.
I know. And you can do it personally as well, but you are capped by your salary still. So even if you earn 30,000 a year and you have headroom for previous years, you're still capped at that 30,000. So that's just something to be mindful of. So it is a bit complex, but we do the calcs for you, and we just tell you, and then you go, okay, I'll do that then, or not. So yeah.
And because you mentioned limited companies there, but also there's a lot of business owners that are either just sole traders or in partnerships. Are the rules any different if you're not under that limited company banner?
No, you just don't pay income tax on. So if you're a sole trader, you pay income tax on anything you've earned. So if you pay a pension contribution, so say you've earned 60,000, okay, but you paid 10 grand into your pension, you only pay tax on the 50. So it reduces your taxable income.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And then, so how do you decide how much to pay into your pension as opposed to other areas of savings?
So we'd go, remember we did that triangle in the last session. We look at, have you got your emergency fund? Have you got sufficient money in sort of medium-term savings? Have you cleared off all those what ifs this happens, all that? And then we can say, right, we can comfortably afford to put that away for the longer term. You can access it at 55, but really we want to commit that money for as long as possible. So really that is a balancing act. Remember we talked before about once you move one part, lots of other things change. We need to make sure that your cash flow, your personal cash flow and your business cash flow is sufficient in order to make that contribution.
Yeah. And
I help you, basically.
Perfect, yeah, which is the best way. It takes all the guesswork out of it. And so if you haven't got those, because you're saying, it's never too early to start contributing, the sooner the better, but if you haven't got that buffer in that 3 to 6 months money, you still worth putting a little bit off to one side, maybe splitting how you're saving, or not, or just ignore the pension until you do have that the foundations in place.
So no, I wouldn't necessarily commit to a pension before you've got all the other ducks in a row. Make sure you're protected. Make sure your income is protected. What happens on death is protected. Make sure you've got that emergency fund. It doesn't have to be 3 months worth of expenditure if you don't feel comfortable with that. But make sure you're okay for today before you commit money to a long-term investment. So no, I wouldn't. I would wait until you're up on your feet and ready to invest in the longer term. And I do discourage it with clients. I have actively discouraged it until they've got that emergency pot, and then we look at savings. It's better to protect today than worrying about the future.
Definitely.
At the moment.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, you've covered eventualities, don't you? As best you can. So now, before we get on to the knowing how much that you've got enough to retire on, just one quick question from a business point of view is that if you're setting up a pension where you're paying in from the business, who owns the pension? Is it still your pension, or does the business own the pension? It's
your pension. It's your pension.
And
so it's completely unconnected, actually. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. And then, so as far as planning for your retirement, or the knowing how much to pay in, how do you work out knowing that you have enough to retire on once you get to that phase?
So we can do an analysis of what you've got at the moment, take into account your state pension and what pots you've got at the moment, and we can plug the gap. But to be really candid, it might be that you need to pay £1,000 a month to achieve the goal you want. So perhaps your goal is a little bit big, and we are simply driven by budget. So actually what you pay in is worked out by what surplus you have. It can't be any other factor, unless you're like, right, well, I'm going to eat beans on toast for the rest of my life. Again, that's about today is more important, and you need to make sure that you have sufficient for today before you're paying to the future. So it's all budget driven. If I'm honest. So that's how much we work out. We can do other analysis, but it's kind of meaningless if you can't afford it. We did an analysis for a client, and she was £3,400 she needed to commit every month to retire on. It was a bit of a silly figure, but she couldn't afford it. She only had £500 a month, so we did that.
Yeah.
And hope that the growth is there, and hope that something else changes, and we adjust her expectations of what her retirement will look like.
Because with do you think, okay, I think X amount a year is how much I'm going to need to live off, and then you just say, okay, so then I may well live X amount of years, so I need to then make sure there's this amount of money in there. How do you work out that bit?
Okay.
Obviously, the growth of the pot as well at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it is a bit of a finger in the air, but what we do is we get your expenditure now and what it will likely be in retirement. So you probably paid your mortgage off, you get different allowances, you know, when you're an OAP, you get your bus pass and gas and electric help and all that kind of stuff, discounted council tax. So your spending does go down, as does your lifestyle. You spend less money. So we work out what you think you might need. And you work that out for the year. So it might be, I need 30,000 a year, 40,000, 20, who knows? Some people need 12, some people need more. And then we multiply that figure by 20. Okay. Now that is such a rough calculation, but if we do it, 30,000 times 20 is a £600,000 pot.
Okay, yeah.
But if I'm honest, there's another way of looking at it where you go, well, if you've got £600,000 in your pension pot, let's use £200,000 in your pension pot, and you're going to leave it invested. This is one of the ways you can take your pension. You leave it invested and you achieve maybe 6% growth a year on it. If you just take out 5% growth, your pot is maintaining, actually it's slightly growing. We try and make sure it grows with inflation, but with inflation at the moment, actually then from a £200,000 pot, you could create a 10,000 income based on taking out 5% growth. So you can look at it two different ways, okay? But roughly, whatever your pot is, if you say, right, I'm going to take about 5% a year out of it, that's the sort of income that you could receive. There's two different ways to do it. But again, you're reliant on growth, and it isn't about, oh, I've got 30,000 in my pot, that's what I'm going to get every year. No, that has to create the income. So if you had 30,000 in your pot, you'd be looking at about £1,500 a year in income from that. It's not a lot.
Yeah, that's it.
So you need to be up in the hundreds of thousands. You need to really start thinking about, I need a good few 100,000 in my pot to have a meaningful retirement. But if that is creating 10,000 a year, plus your state pension, if you've got full state pension, that's 19 and a bit grand a year. It's not too bad, you know.
No, that's it, yeah.
Well, you know, when we were 80, we're just going to be going to have cups of tea at the garden centre, so we don't need much money.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, like I say, the cost of living is so much less, isn't it? So yeah. And so as far as if there's people, they're in their 40s, 50s, don't have a pension, it's a two-pronged question, I suppose. Is it ever too late to be taking out a pension, or that you've reached an age where you really need to look at other ways to be able to generate an income in retirement?
It's never too late to take out a pension. I've got 50-year-olds that's starting now. We've still got 15 years. Yeah. You know, or they work till they're 70. You know, it is a case of I can't magic the money. You know, if you haven't been saving it, you are going to have to work for longer. Yeah. To generate more other income would have to be a business of some description. You know, some people look at property, so high risk. Property is so very high risk and so tax inefficient that we don't tend to encourage second properties anymore. It used to be great, it really isn't now. It's a very tax inefficient way to hold money and very high risk. So we do still encourage pensions because you're still getting your free money from the government, this tax relief. It still is such a good proposition. So no, we would still encourage pensions or ISAs. There are other ways to create an income, but it would still be investment based. Yes. It provides the flexibility, accessibility, and tax efficiency that you need. So never too late, never, you know, otherwise you'll be working till you drop. It's not very nice.
And because can you put properties or have a property that you rent out in a pension or as a pension?
So you can commercial property only, only commercial property. Buy-to-lets, sadly not. But if you had like my office here, I could put it in my pension. It's actually very good planning. Yeah. If I don't own it, I rent it. Yeah. There's too many issues to get to own it. but I could use my pension pot to buy it, and that's quite technical, and you do need advice to do that. Really, really, good tax efficient way. If you have buy-to-let properties, you can put them into a company, but really need about three or more to make that suitable. And again, it's complicated, you need advice on that. You need to speak to an accountant about that. But generally, buy-to-let, very sadly, it's an asset class that the government have killed off, basically.
Yeah. Okay. And
I know. Well, it's the cost of entering it is the stamp duty, and you get additional stamp duty, so it costs you an extra 3% or whatever the stamp duty. The cost of running it is your marginal rate of tax. So if you're a 20 or 40% taxpayer, it costs you that. And to exit, it costs you capital gains tax plus an additional 8% levy. So it could be 18 to 28% to exit it. If I propose that as an investment proposition to you, you'd be like, no thanks, James. No, very expensive. Plus you've got masses of risk. You've got tenants that don't pay rent. Oh, I had so many clients that their tenants use COVID as a sort of tool to not pay their rent, then they can't get them out, then they trash it, then you've got the maintenance, you've got the phone calls at 10 o'clock at night, my boiler doesn't work, my light bulb's gone. It's just become the tenant has all the sort of power, if you like. It sounds like I don't like tenants. It's not to do with that. I'm talking from an investment proposition. It's not good.
That was it. It was to protect from landlords, but it's how things have swung, or the situation as it is. Yeah. So now we are at the grand old retirement age, or young retirement age, however you've been investing. So you've got your pension pot, and now what? How do you get your hands on the money?
How do you get your hands on the money? So you've got a final salary pot, that defined benefit. Getting your hands on that money is they basically say we can pay you, and you just get that every month. There are options on that with final salary schemes. They do offer what's known as a cash equivalent transfer value, so the cash equivalent. So rather than take your monthlies or your annual payment, do you want a big lump sum instead? So we can look at that, and sometimes that's very, very good proposition, because they'll give you sort of 30 years worth of money as a cash lump sum, rather than taking it for 30 years and it becomes like the other pension style, and much more accessible, and you can leave it to your kids and things like that. But you have to be the right person. So that's one of the options on that. I'm going to leave that there. When you have a defined contribution in pot, where you're putting money in and you don't know what you're going to get out of it, like most people have, there are two ways to take your money primarily. The first way is you take that money and you go to a provider and you say, here's my lump sum, how much can you give me for the rest of my life? And they do a calculation, and they say, Rachel, we think you're going to live till this age. We'll give you X amount every year, and it dies with you unless you put some other benefits in with it. And generally that's called an annuity, and generally these days they are very bad value. You don't get a lot of income for your money, and most people do not take that option, not unless they are actually, unless they're sick and they don't have long to live. Some people take that option, so you don't tend to do that. That was the only option previously. They've opened it up. Now they've opened it up, and when there was this, everyone's going to go and use their pension pots to buy Ferraris. Well, it didn't happen actually. You have your pot, your pot of money there. Let's say it's £300,000. What are you going to do with that? Well, you keep it invested basically, and you draw out of it what you need when you need it. So it's called drawdown. So if you are doing a phased retirement and perhaps you're slowly giving up work, you can just take a little bit of money out in the early years to top up your income, and then you can increase that amount as you see fit. Now, we use an analogy where between about 65 and 75 is the go-go years, or up to 75 is the go-go years, where actually you're probably going to spend a lot more money. So in those years, you're probably going to want a lot of money out of it. Then for about 75 to 85 is will go slow, you do less. You know, I've definitely noted my folks have slowed down since they've reached their over 75. And then after 85, it's a bit no-go. You tend to not do an awful lot, and therefore you don't spend an awful lot unless you need care. That's another conversation to have. So your spending naturally goes in that sort of trend. So with an annuity, it's set every year, and it gives you not that flexibility. With this drawdown option, you can take quite a bit out in the early years and less out in the latter years. And you have to be very careful, because if you take too much out in the early years, you're going to deplete your pot, and it won't be able to produce you that growth that creates the income. So remember we said before, if you have an investment of, if you have a pot of 300,000, and you just want to take a little bit, and you have a pot of 300,000, it grows by 7% this year. Brilliant. We're going to take 5%. We're going to take 15,000 out of that pot, and that's going to be used for an income. So my pot is still 300,000 plus the little 2% of growth. So my pot is maintained. If you took out 10%, oh wow, you've now taken 30,000 out. So you've only got 270,000 left to create you an income. And if you're taking 5% of 270,000, that's only going to give you 13,500 a year. So can you see your income is going to get less the more you deplete your pot? But we do all the cash flow analysis for that. So we work out how long, if you take your money out at this rate and it grows at this rate, how long will that last you? And we call it the 100-year life. We assume everyone is going to live to 100. We make sure that at the end you still have enough money at age 100 to create that income. So we do those calcs.
And because, like you say, it's an income. So when you take that money back, so say you drew down, well, whether it's 10, 20 or 30,000 pounds, do you get all of that money, or are you paying any tax because you've earned?
So 25% of that pot is tax-free. So you get 25% of it as tax-free, and you only pay tax on 75% of it. So it depends on your other income as to how you're taxed. So you can either take just from the tax-free bit, and therefore you won't get taxed, or you can take a bit that is tax-free and a bit that is taxable, depending on your other tax situation, how that would work out. So again, we help you with that. Yeah. And you are taxed at your marginal rate. So if you're still working, earning 50, 60 grand a year, if you take money out of your taxable part of your pension, you will get taxed at 40% on that. But if you're only earning, you've cut your hours and actually you're earning 20,000 a year, and you take from your taxable bit of your pension, you only get taxed at 20%. So that's why we use the taxed bit and the tax-free bit carefully to make sure that you're not paying too much tax through the years, and we try and time that correctly. So often we take the tax-free bit out to top up your income when it's still high, and then the taxable bit. And again, when your state pension kicks in, your state pension is taxed, so you can adjust your income accordingly.
So it's about the amount that you're drawing.
It's not that easy, is it?
No, definitely not. Hence needing people like yourself. So it's about how much you're drawing as an income, not the tax rate that you paid in at. If you paid in at lower rate and drew down at a higher tax rate, I know that probably doesn't make sense, then you're paying more on the income that you're taking in that year, not whether you had the higher rate or the basic tax rate top up from the government when you paid in.
So, say that again, Rachel. Sorry, that again.
So the tax that you're paying, you need to add in what the government are already paying you. So it's what the government are already paying you, and then what's left. So then what is the basic tax rate?
So it's all to do with the amount of income. So you add up your income, and if it takes you over the threshold to higher rate taxpayer, then yes, you will pay high rate tax on the bit that takes you over that.
Yes.
So it's, you add it to your existing income. So that's how income taxes work. You add up all your income,
And then with the on the out of the pension pot, you're just paying the tax on whatever level you come to. So if you paid in at a higher rate tax, but you're drawing down at a lower rate tax, you're
oh yes,
yeah, the bit that you're taking
pay
the lower.
Which is why it's so good when you pay in and get the high rate tax relief, but when you take out, even if you're a non-rate taxpayer, it's great. So yeah.
And I know that care is a subject in itself, but is it something that you also need to be aware of, and that's where part of sitting down with somebody like yourself to make sure that there is that provision down the line? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that's the balance, isn't it, to make it how much savings you've got.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think you've answered it, but just want to ask again, just in case. So it's that you can decide whether you want to take just an equal monthly payment, or just take money as and when. That's up to you once you've got there with it.
Yeah, and we review it all the time, and if you need a bit more, right, we're going on traveling around the world, and we want to take 20k or 30k to do that. Okay, well, how's that going to impact your income future? All right, yeah, okay, that's fine, we can do that. Yeah. But we tend to set other money aside for lump sums like that. But anyway, I won't go too much into that, but yeah.
And I know this is also an area that you've touched upon, but with your pension pot, as far as what happens when you die, is that things that are automatically set within a pension, or things that you need to make sure are in place?
So you complete what's known as an expression of wish, and you telling the pension provider who you want to receive your pension. If we'd been speaking 6 months ago, I'd have told you to put it into trust. The trust laws have changed, so I now wouldn't tell you to do that. But yes, you need to do an expression of wish to tell the pension provider who gets your pension. But also, you know, it's worth putting in your will as well. And if you take this annuity option or the final salary option, there isn't anything to pass down generally other than 50% of your income. If you have a pot like the 300,000 we talked about, and you've just been taking the growth out, you still have 300,000 that can pass to your spouse, or it can pass to your children. So they inherit your pension pot. Happy days, it's brilliant. So yeah.
And just to come back to what you said earlier, I'm still amazed by the fact that you can pay in for your children from they're born. I mean,
yeah,
incredible. I mean, there's also
your partner, and your partner. Even if your partner isn't earning, you can still pay into a pension for them too.
Oh, okay.
But you're capped at 3,600. Everybody can pay 3,600 gross into their pension.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Amazing. And really, I suppose I've asked all the questions I had. Are there any other common questions that you come across when you're meeting people to talk about pensions that we haven't covered, or not?
No, not really. But I do know that everybody will ask the same questions again because it is so complicated. So they'll go away going, "I've got it." Yes. And then their partner or whatever will say, or their friend will say, "What did she say?" I don't know, but I understood it at the time.
That's it. Yeah.
Keep asking the questions. It's okay to keep asking the questions. And that's why we have that review meeting every year, and we go through it. And it's not really for you guys to learn or know, it's down to us. So don't worry too much about it. But yeah, I think we've covered loads. So.
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, hopefully that's helped to answer everybody's questions. And just goes, like I say, to highlight how important it is to have the knowledge of an expert, to put things in place, but also with the ever-evolving changes in the landscape. Yeah, that's it going forwards.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just there's nothing better than knowing that you're making those steps towards a retirement and not having the worries. So
exactly.
Or just knowing where you're at and making a start. You know, because even if things aren't in place, that's the important thing, is just to make a start.
Yeah. Perfect. Brilliant.
Lovely. Well, thank you
so much.
No, well, and you, it's been a pleasure. So, and what I'll do is, along with this video, I'll make sure that your details are there if anybody would like to come and speak to you direct as well. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks so much.